Well, the man at the helm of the city that's been experiencing explosions, fires, water crisis, and in some instances challenges as far as revenue collection at City Power. And they've been doing some operations around of trying to collect that money. That is Mayor Kabelo Gwamanda. He's joining me now in the studio. He's been around today doing what is called accelerated service delivery, from road markings to yourself actually getting into the hole. I saw you touching the pipes. Did you know what you're doing?
Of course, I'd have to be orientated by the by the experts and shown the how to process those particular nuts and bolts, so that I'm able to do at least something in contribution to the service delivery.
You know, Mayor, a lot of people are actually quite amazed that you actually came into the studio and you're sitting here right now doing this interview. Are you media shy? Are you not wanting to talk to the media? Do you think you don't need to speak to the media? What is the issue with yourself and availability, especially when it comes to media?
I think it's a combination of issues. Right? Firstly, I won't say that I'm media shy. I'm not. The fact of the matter is that this administration has been a very challenging one, especially in the beginning phases. Right? I needed to orientate myself enough with the processes that are required, so that whenever I'm expected to speak to certain critical issues, I have an understanding and an appreciation of the situation that I need to bring clarity on, as opposed to jumping at the first invitation for media just for me to be here and to have a conversation with yourself, whereby there's certain decisions as well that need to be taken on the ground all the time. I know we live in a digital era, but at times you need to familiarize yourself enough with the approvals that you give, so that you do not find yourself wanting. The level in which we are experiencing emergencies, it's a touch and go situation, but you have to give it.
And one says it needs you to be present. Yes. And are you bothered at all by the tag puppet mayor because of the fact that you are not forefront engaging with those type of issues?
So there is a term that has been created by opposition. It makes sense for someone to explain puppet mayor to a circumstance that they are not accustomed to, that is foreign. It's the best way that they can rationalize what is unfolding before them. So it's their opinion, and it's their problem, not mine. I understand how I manage. I'm the custodian of the coalition, in full, not just rhetoric, but I need to manage each and every dynamic, political, administrative, and ensure that the government of the day is efficient in its operations. So they can deem puppet mayor, they can deem me whatever it is that they choose to. But at the end of the day, my contribution towards the developmental seat of Johannesburg is what matters the most. And that's when they'll actually have something to say about the administration. For now, it's just their opinions, and it's fine.
That is the first time I hear a rather stern and very strong tone from yourself in the statement that you wrote to the Minister of Water and Sanitation. Basically, you told him to mind his business. I mean, is there an intergovernmental dispute on the cards here? What's going on?
So, I will not put it as harshly as that. But there has to be an appreciation, you know. What the citizens are always advocating for is consequence management, right? And if you have a role to play in the value system of water supply, but you miss the opportunity of citing the cause of the challenges, and you focus on the tail end. My role in the water crisis, and I understand that there are failures in that regard as well, of which I've deployed mechanisms to mitigate, is to ensure that whilst there's infrastructure upgrade, I am able to provide water to the residents in the city of Johannesburg, because I'm a client. I purchase in bulk, and then I distribute to the residents. But equally so, I think when the infrastructure maintenance plan for rainwater was introduced, and especially starting in the city of Johannesburg, I was on the helm of the awareness of the fact that there will be water shortage in the city of Johannesburg, to ensure that communication is efficient and residents understand that we are doing this in their best interest. And that's where I started leading communications. Not to say I'm taking responsibility of the fact that there's a shortage of water. Yes, I understand that it's a constitutional obligation of government to ensure that we supply water. But looking at the value system in its entirety, my role there cannot be the ultimate cause of what we are faced with. I would have preferred that we use the same approach as they did initially when they introduced the infrastructure upgrades, whereby we sat down, we came up with a communication plan and strategy, and we collaborated. And the residents, although uncomfortable as it is to not have water, but understanding the fact that communication is consistent and it's accurate, and you understand what to expect, when, how. Not to say it's because of or it's due to, but no, we have a problem that we are dealing with. Let us collaborate and let us ensure that we run the city efficiently.
So these water crisis meetings, it seems it's not the first one, judging by the letter from or at least by the statement from Water and Sanitation and read by the Minister as well in the Presidency, that it seems your colleague previously also did not attend these water crisis meetings. And the frustration is that there is an expectation that yourself, as the political head, also as the man in charge of the executive, when there are dry taps that are everywhere in your city, and there's a possibility of day zero, you would want to actually be in that meeting and seem to be in charge and not send a delegate to come and represent you.
So I think we should start by citing the fact that I did not delegate anyone to attend any meeting. I had no knowledge of any meeting that was taking place. I was advised at the time that the meeting was happening, stating that you are being mentioned in the meeting. Why are you not in the meeting? Confused as I was, I needed to get a sense as to what is this meeting about, when was it called, and my immediate reaction was to fight with my office in saying that how do you not tell me about a meeting of this importance? But it turns out there was no invitation to my office. Firstly,
I mean, come on, Mayor. You mean your MMC didn't tell you that the minister is coming, we're having a meeting? He couldn't pick up a phone, send you a WhatsApp message or something and tell you that the minister is coming?
When you interact with the city, you interact with me, not my MMC. My MMC has my delegated authority to act on my behalf, not the other way around. So the right thing is that, Executive Mayor, this is what is unfolding. This is your level of involvement in the process. Are you available to attend? I then need to make a determination, but based on the importance and the critical nature of such conversations, I would have, at the time when the first meeting was happening, I was attending a farewell for one of the consulate generals. I had started engaging with the members of the diplomatic corps because, as you would understand, as an economic hub of the country, those relations are critical. So it was the first time that I was engaging the members of the diplomatic corps, following stabilizing the government itself so that we can provide the level of comfort and security in saying the city is stable. Let us begin to engage on an international level. I would have easily extended an apology and stated that due to current circumstances, I will not be able to make it. I have to attend to this issue, which involves in the main the residents, and attended to that meeting. I'm notified during the meeting by someone I didn't even know that I met at the event itself.
Says, your name has been mentioned.
you're not in a meeting that you are supposed to be in.
Right.
But following that, I was invited to a meeting, a virtual meeting, and I requested humbly to say, Minister, can we have a meeting between yourself and I, so that we can be able to address issues that are there, you know, and we find an amicable way to collaborate in how we deliver these services.
The picture that's being painted is that you're lashing at the minister is lashing at you, and there's no working together at a critical time such as this, because I mean you would know even from your counterparts some of these issues and the backlog that you're faced with in terms of infrastructure maintenance would require a budget far beyond what you have, and in some instances you would actually want National to come on board and assist you.
Of course we would. Look, one of the priorities of the government of the day is to resuscitate. And I'm saying resuscitate deliberately because those relationships were compromised by the previous administration, the intergovernmental relations. It was only for the first time when I ascended into office that I was invited to a mayor's forum meeting that is coordinated by the premier. Those meetings had not taken place in the longest of time, and purely because of political differences. And it shouldn't be that way, because these intergovernmental relations are purely on the basis of ensuring that all spheres of government collaborate, because there are certain competencies that are beyond the scope of local government. I mean, policing, it's provincial. And you need province to be able to assist in how you address crime. I mean, we are only limited to bylaw enforcement. What am I going to do with just bylaw enforcement? So, I mean, the Premier himself understands that I would endeavor by all means to attend those meetings so that I'm abreast with certain processes that need to be unlocked. Now recently we've just signed an MOU to operate our own ambulances on a local government because of the disjuncture that existed in the past that we are unlocking. So there would not be a reason for me to be hostile to any sphere of government. I never have. I've got no intention of becoming hostile in the future, you know. So another thing, especially in the city, I mean, it is not 2/3 of the city that is affected. It's not. Out of the 765 pressure points that we have, only 22 are affected. I'm not downplaying the fact that dry taps are an issue, but I'm saying there are pockets that are affected, but in other areas there's consistent water supply. So our our efforts in the main are directed at those critical areas. I was in engagements with councillors of these wards, and I told them that I will see to it personally that whilst the maintenance is ongoing and they are affected, I deploy at least a minimum of 2 water tankers, because there are instances where you find there are senior citizens who do not have the strength to go and collect water and then come back. I need to find a way in which we can intervene on that level, because these are our residents and it's inconvenience on our account. And therefore we need to go an extra mile to ensure that we make this unbearable situation slightly livable.
I mean, barring the Palmeat system, which recently was hit by the storm, rainwater says the problem might not necessarily be at the resource level, because if we look at some of our dams, some are sitting at 96%, some at 100%, others are over 60%, which in their own books is quite good. But the problem is at consumption level. But communities will tell you, but we sitting with dry taps for weeks. In some instances, Tsakane and all the other places, I think the city, rather, Tsakane is not your area, but in Soweto and so forth, they'll tell you that our taps are running dry, right? And rainwater says, well, that would indicate that the problem is water is being lost in the leakages in the system, not necessarily at where the people need to be getting the water, which means there's a lot of water that is getting lost in the infrastructure of the city.
I don't think it would be wise to get into that debate, because you might find that it's another one of those back and forths that might occur in this particular discussion, and I want to shy away from a situation where I contradict what you are saying, by extension what has been alleged by whichever sphere of government. But for me, it's to say that the one challenge or problem that was cited by Rainwater, I think, is the fact that we are consuming more than the license that we've applied for, right? And we acknowledge the fact, but it's only since I think this water crisis started. It's not a historical issue that I'm faced with as the city of Johannesburg. So it is needed for us to ensure that we are consistent with the supply to the residents. Right? We have to get to a point where we need to upgrade the license. We can't move away from it because the city of Johannesburg is a melting pot. Everyone that thinks of opportunities, their first point of departure is the city of Johannesburg. And the developments that are taking place are happening on a large scale. Right? And that is increasing the pressure on the infrastructure that we have. So it's not just a one-sided issue that we need to be looking at. That's why I think the minister called for another meeting on Thursday, of which on TV
you'll be attending. You're confirming your attendance. So you are arguing. You're agreeing with Rainwater on the fact that the challenge is on the consumption side, but how you're putting it is that the reason why you are exceeding your licensed allocation is because of the developments in the city, people flocking in, so you have more people consuming more water, there are more developments going up, and therefore you are consuming more than your allocated, what do you call, lot as far as water is concerned. Not because you are losing water in the system.
I'm saying this is one of them.
Okay.
There are water leakages everywhere. We have begun, as you say, the accelerated service delivery is to attend to those issues, those minor issues that are overlooked. That might be a contributing factor towards some of the challenges that we face with the water, to ensure that we eliminate all the possibilities that we can. And by the time we arrive at a conclusion as to what the cause is, we have already dealt with a number of issues that are related to some of the causes of the water shortages. I'm not saying it's entirely as a result of the water that is being lost, but it's part of it. Yeah. Because I think you made mention earlier about the fact that we are dealing with a lot in the city. Most of the hijacked buildings that are there are using water without paying for the rates and services and electricity as well. So that's a loss. So we have technical and non-technical losses. And the more we begin to address some of the challenges, is the more the water issue, the disaster issue, and other major events that the city is faced with will be corrected.
Yeah. Continue with our focus in the city of Johannesburg. We've touched on the water crisis, but there are other housekeeping issues that the mayor, while we have him here, he might need to weigh on. That's Mayor Kabelo Gwamanda. You can weigh in tonight on 072-110-5584. Mayor, let's get into some of those housekeeping issues. I'm sure you saw the letter, at least. They tell us that they wrote you a letter from Action SA wanting to know about the status of the Metro Center, where you've told 3,000 workers to work from home. Firstly, is that a real issue that you told 3,000 workers to work from home owing to an electrical transformer maintenance? And how is that affecting their delivery?
Okay. So, as you would know, that the city of Johannesburg, the property portfolio has a custodian, of which we refer to as the landlord. And that custodian is Johannesburg Property Company, which is JPC. Following a fire that happened as a result of cable theft of the transformers, right? A fire started, and that fire posed a threat. But before the fire, there was a council resolution that Metro Center, the precinct, has to be decanted. It is structurally condemned. The only remaining factor to that was putting a budget in place and ensuring that the procurement process is undertaken in a fair manner and in a manner that is in line with our priority of good governance. So when the fire happened, the landlord, based on a preliminary finding, recommended that there has to be an immediate closure of Metro Center. But the report itself, we needed to have a mayoral committee so that we can deliberate on it and get a sense of this emergency evacuation. Is it one that is practical? Is it viable? The structural damage that has happened, how detrimental is it to the well-being of the employees there as well as councillors? Those responses were not there. So I had to take the report back and say, by virtue of there having been a recommendation, we cannot not act on this particular recommendation by the landlord. So we need to evacuate at this point. However, I need a report to be brought back to a mayoral committee that has a technical report on the findings of the structure, the cause of the fire, that would enable the city of Johannesburg to proceed. Because the precinct is very big. There are different wings. There's the council chamber wing. The fire started in a section or a building that we do not use. But by virtue of the transformers having been damaged, that's one of the contributing factors to the evacuation, because it interrupted with the servers and the systems, and we were unable to effectively communicate.
Right. So the fact that the employees are failing to get their emails at this particular point, work emails, is that what's happening?
One of the reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we are evacuating Metro Center based on that council resolution. The process on which we are going to decant and the plan is what has to be tabled before a mayoral committee this week, so that we can establish which parts of the precinct are usable and which parts of the precincts are structurally condemned. And I'm not an expert. No, I cannot take a decision, an uninformed decision at that might have far-reaching implications in the future, because decanting Metro Center with all those employees and finding alternative accommodation for all those offices, it's a huge implication on the taxpayers' money, and we need to be as responsible as possible in how we do things. So the order has been given for Metro Center to be decanted.
Okay.
The report that has to be tabled is the one that will enable me to respond to Action SA with facts, to say, based on the outcome of this investigation, only this part, or maybe because there's A block, there's B block, there's council chamber wing. We as councillors use B block and the council chamber wings. Yeah. So for now, it's only the council chamber wing, which is the office bearers, the city manager, the speaker of council, and the executive mayor. I might just ask you to borrow me your studio for an office. But we have to have conclusive
But
evidence.
Is it that bad, I mean, to the point that you failed to secure a venue for a meeting, that you've actually missed one of the council meetings?
So one thing that I need to remind our viewers about is that many council meetings have been deferred for a wide variety of issues, right? But in this instance, there had to be a decision that needed to be taken. And that decision, one, you go into an emergency procurement, which has to be done in the form of a deviation. And you have to account at the end of the day to the very same councillors. You say, how do you spend so much money?
Because they do say they are hoping you are going to conduct oversight.
Yes. How do you spend so much money? You know, and the second part, that's for us to proceed. I understand that quarterly reports had to be tabled, but these quarterly reports are from the multi-party government. Most of them, they neglected them on the basis of certain agenda items that were a priority to them. But we are ensuring that we cover as much ground as possible, and we backtrack as far as last year to finalize all the reports. That's the first part. The second part is that we can take a risk and say council chamber wing is not affected because the fire broke out in a different building and risked the life of councillors. And we find ourselves in a situation, we've become prone to disasters, and we can't take that risk based on the lives of people.
Right.
And the third option, which in my view was a responsible option, was to defer council enough for us to have a report that will enable us to account.
Yes.
A technical
So you
report.
didn't fail to secure a venue. You deferred council. It wasn't going to happen.
We were not going to use the facilities.
There was never a chance of finding an alternative venue.
There is. We do have alternative venues as council. However, those venues were already booked. That's why we could not use them. We had to find alternative venues. And an alternative venue that is not owned by the city comes at a cost. And if it's the government that's paying, who knows? It might just be north of $1 million.
Yeah.
And how then do you justify that to taxpayers in saying that we needed to do this? And our council takes 2 days at a time.
Yeah.
So the responsible approach in this was to defer council.
So which I suppose then segues to the next question around the status of the finances of the city. The Democratic Alliance believing that you are mum about that and you're not quite as honest as you should be, for example, around wasteful expenditure. They're saying the COCTA oversight engagement, saying this has increased by as much as 44%. And they're saying this is a cause for concern. Not only that, the city has been downgraded by GCR from A+ to A in terms of the credit ratings, which is going to be problematic if you would need to get some money, especially for the upgrades that you need to do.
Okay. So, opposition, eh?
They're playing the opposition game.
It's their job. Yeah, I can't fault them on that. However, we will be tabling the quarterly report. It hasn't gone to council as yet. In terms of the downgrading, the downgrading happened, I'll have to get clarity, but what I know is the customer satisfaction survey. But the problem is that I cannot speak to them now because they have to go through the Auditor General for me to be able to pronounce on them. But in council, I can be able to cite them in certain inputs that I make. The city's financial state had been compromised in the past. We are in a recovery process. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take us time for us to be able to have an upgrade in our rating, for argument's sake. The city was in a point where it was unable to pay its service providers. But the problem is that it was selective in terms of service providers that it couldn't pay and legal fees that are exorbitant in nature that they were willing to pay. So the compromising of the finances of the city, firstly, in my view, until I am able to get concrete evidence, it was an act of deliberate sabotage by opposition. It was deliberate because our opposition is made up of advocates, accountants, chartered accountants. Now, how does that happen? That they compromise the finances of the city to a point that they are so desperate to pass a loan, and yet they are having media briefings suggesting the fact that there is nothing wrong with the city's financial state. When we inherited the city,
This is from Mayor Palazzi in the few months that she was there.
This is from, and it was only a few months.
Yeah.
And you can't understand how you would turn the city's finances upside down in just over a year. It didn't make sense to us.
How are you dealing with your executive? One in particular, the MMC for Economic Development, MMC MISI. There's been reports around her procuring money that would have come from the Johannesburg Property Company and went to the ANC Youth League. Now, of late, we're hearing of appointments to the board of unqualified and politically connected individuals who are what? One person has no matric, another one is a cashier with no experience really in this particular space. When you read that, what are you saying as the mayor to your member of the executive?
Okay, so for me to be able to come to a determination on a course of action in relation to any of my MMCs, I need to conduct an investigation. And I can't do that. I need to speak to the city manager to do a background in those allegations first, so that when there's a report that has conclusive evidence, then I'm able to convene the mayoral committee and take a decision. But MMCs in the past have had adverse findings by Section 9 institutions. And the mayors of the time dismissed it and said, no, we are not a kangaroo court here in council. We can't do anything about these particular administrators. I'm not saying that I'm trying to compare the two. What I'm saying is that the government of local unit cannot be co-opted to taking immediate actions based on the views of opposition. We need to satisfy ourselves with the necessary evidence that is required for us to take a decisive action, because these are councillors before they are MMCs.
Quick one before we let you go. Aussie in Midrand evening. Thabo, please ask the mayor, how long will the water shifting last or water shortages last? Should we start buying storage tanks? Eskom has taught us the hard lesson and we want to be ready now.
I think that's a very pertinent and fair question, of which brings us to the intergovernmental relations. In our mayoral committee, we had an engagement about having a water purifying system that belongs to the city, water purification plant that belongs to the city. Right now, we do not have one. We solely rely on rainwater. But before we can even say that that is the next course of action, we need to hear what the minister has to say about possible solutions in which can mitigate issues on the level of rainwater, so that when we come with our own approach, then it's a collaborated effort. I do not want to say at this point that there is a risk of day zero. What I would like to say, in fact, and encourage the residents to do is allow this relationship between these spheres of government to come up with a long-lasting solution. And I'm hoping, based on our differences in what we prioritize, that we will arrive at a consensus that is best for the residents, and we'll put our differences aside. When all others fail, yes, of which is a growing concern of mine, that government has begun to outsource some of its functions to private sector. It's one thing that we are doing everything in our power as the city of Johannesburg, a local government sphere, to prevent. And the only way in which we can prevent that is to try and improve as best we can on the services that we render to our people. So we will give maximum effort to meeting the entities that are on other spheres of government halfway, right, to prevent such concerns from our residents.
May I appreciate your time. Don't be a stranger. Come back again. Let's have some more engagement. There's a lot of other issues that we didn't have time to touch on, but I appreciate you coming in today.
Not a problem. Thank you very much, and good evening to your viewers.
That's the mayor of the city of Johannesburg, Kabelo Gwamanda.